JD Vance, the Republican senator and contender to be Trump's vice presidential running mate, appeared on CNN with Kaitlan Collins. And Kaitlan Collins has been doing some great interviews lately, including this one, where she politely, calmly, respectfully, but brutally exposes JD Vance's hypocrisy. And here it's on the subject of the college campus protest, and then JD Vance's willingness to downplay the significance of January 6th. We see this constantly with MAGA folks where they're all hardcore law and order until it comes to January 6th. And it's really important that we point that out because, yes, it exposes a lack of principle, but it also exposes the apologia for the broader implications of what happened on January 6th. So with that being said, here it is.
Okay, so you agree that people who break in and vandalize a building should be prosecuted?
Exactly.
Okay, I'm just checking because you did help raise money for people who did so on January 6th, which was, impeding an official proceeding, breaking into a building that they weren't allowed to be in, and vandalizing the Capitol.
Well, Kaitlan, I know that this is the obsession of the national media to talk about what happened 2 years ago, 3 years ago on January the 6th.
It's not an obsession. I'm just seeing if it's a double standard.
Let me answer the question, Kaitlan. I mean, look, here's been my basic argument about January the 6th. If you beat up a cop, of course, you deserve to go to prison. If you violated the law, you should suffer the consequences. But there are people who protested on January the 6th who have had the complete weight of the Justice Department thrown at them when, at worst, they're accused of misdemeanors. Now, again.
Okay,
Right, so that's a dishonest thing we hear all the time. There were old grandmas that were just peacefully outside the Capitol, 600 feet away, and they were thrown in the clink for decades or something crazy. When in reality, from all that I can tell, there's been proportional reactions based on what the people were doing. Yes, if you were peaceful and you didn't enter the Capitol, you probably won't be treated like someone who violently broke in an attempt to impede an official proceeding. But not so law and order when it gets to January 6th. Now, I want to address again this liberals are obsessed with January 6th topic because I've been accused of this before. And while most people like Kaitlan Collins say, no, I'm not obsessed, I say I'm obsessed. And I want you to know that. And I want you to know why this is a quote unquote obsession of mine. Because I think it's justified to say that about me. Now, it's not just January 6th, but what that represented. So let's go through it, JD, and then I have more clips from this interview. January 6th was the culmination of lies that Trump was telling. These lies were about our elections, and we're telling people baselessly that our elections don't work anymore and that the election was stolen from them and that the country was going to die if they didn't stop Biden from getting into power. And so regardless of if you think like JD Vance does that Trump didn't say explicitly enough, go be violent, and thus he has no moral culpability, it is still undeniably the lies he was telling and him directing people to go to the Capitol that caused the attack. Now, violent things happen in this world. Why is this one so significant? Well, of course, we don't want to downplay the harm that was done, and it was very real. But also, I think to understand it properly, you have to zoom out, and that's why I say it was a culmination, because those very same lies that motivated Trump's followers to attack the Capitol were the same lies Trump was using to justify an attempt, and we'll get into the conversation of a coup attempt in this interview, but a coup attempt, a non-military coup attempt, an attempt to block the peaceful transfer of power to install someone as the president without the people choosing that. And that's actually the opposite of what they chose. They chose Biden to be president, and Trump was dedicated to preventing Biden from actually becoming president, which is not how democracy works. And so this included the fake elector scheme that Trump's currently being prosecuted for. Instead of the lawful electoral college outcome choosing the president, they wanted to fraudulently assert other electors of their own choosing to be the real ones, not the ones that states certified and sent, but instead their own, and then say that that justifies Trump staying in the Oval Office. Trump considered insane things like invoking martial law to use the military to block the peaceful transfer of power. He was talked out of it, but next time he'll have loyalists around him that won't talk him out of it. And he pressured local officials to disenfranchise their state's voters and just declare Trump the victor by fraudulently finding votes, etc. Right? So that month-long effort to prevent Biden from getting into office after he had lawfully won, and then those very same lies that were being used to justify that going on to motivate people to violently attack the Capitol and try to kill politicians and block this certification of Biden's win. That's the broader implications of that day and why we have to focus on it so much. And I am admittedly obsessed with preventing that sort of attack on our democracy. I'm fixated on making sure people understand and we respond accordingly to the anti-democratic leader and movement that is Trump and MAGA. And that is what I think patriotic people do. They are fixated on protecting their democracy. Not to toot my own horn, golly. But then here is moment 2 from this interview.
Standard. And look, Kaitlan, I know you're worried, and I think justifiably so, about
this isn't about me,
threats
Senator.
to
I'm
American...
asking questions about you and how
Well, look,
you would feel about this.
I'm trying to answer the question. I appreciate if you let me. We know that there are threats to American democracy. I think the biggest threat to American democracy, Kaitlan, is that the Biden administration is trying to prevent Donald Trump from campaigning and taking his case to the American people, even as they hide their own candidate.
That's presiding over that case. The Biden administration is not preventing Donald Trump from campaigning. He just did 2 campaign events tonight.
This is a really important point, Kaitlan.
And then on to the same things we hear. But yeah, it's a little weird to say that Biden is preventing Trump from campaigning when Trump's being prosecuted for things that he did, that Biden didn't force him to do. And this case that's going on right now happens to be a local case, so it has nothing to do with the Biden administration. And even the prosecutions at the federal level are being run by a special counsel, similar to how Biden was looked into by a special counsel, independent from Biden's control. Same thing's happening here with Trump, and they can't engage with the evidence being brought against Trump. They can't engage with the laws he potentially violated, so it just has to be vaguely Biden. Sleepy Joe is coordinating the greatest conspiracy in the history of America to take down a political opponent. Then here's more January 6th apologia.
The question fundamentally for our country is, do we want 4 more years of Joe Biden, or do we want 4 more years of the peace and prosperity of Donald Trump? That to me is an easy question.
The last time I checked, President Biden wasn't approving of the chance to hang his vice president and did not call his vice president when their life was in danger on Capitol Hill, something that Mike Pence himself has testified to. So my question is, does it give you any pause to be his vice president, given how he has treated Mike Pence?
Kaitlan, I'm extremely skeptical that Mike Pence's life was ever in danger. I think politics people like to really exaggerate things from time to time.
I know
a lot of folks in the Democratic Party,
Senator.
A lot of folks in the Democratic Party, Kaitlan, act as if January the 6th was the scariest moment of their lives. I think, look,
think about how abusive that is. Trump won't do anything while his followers chant "hang Mike Pence." Then Trump is told that that's being chanted and he's approving of it because Pence wouldn't unilaterally reject the results of a free and fair election. And then Trump gets his allies to all gaslight Mike Pence and go, "You were fine. You're so dramatic," as people were trying to get to him and saying their intention was to hang him, and got really close to the point where Mike Pence was frantically being ushered away by his security as police officers were being brutalized trying to prevent these people from getting to Mike Pence and other politicians. And then it's, oh my gosh, so dramatic. These Democrats, lifelong Democrat Mike Pence is so sensitive. What a snowflake. Cares about his life and then is upset that his boss wouldn't call people off and wouldn't call him to ask if he was okay. Yeesh. Then here's Kaitlan Collins saying, so to be clear, JD Vance, you think this immunity argument is sound from Trump, arguing that if he were to engage in a military coup, he would be immune from criminal prosecution?
And you're basically saying that if the president orders the military to stage a coup, you believe the only remediation for that is that he can be impeached or that Congress can restrict the budget?
Well, Kaitlan, first of all, you're dealing with hypotheticals here that are completely outside the bounds of this particular situation.
I'm sorry, I hate to pause this quickly, but we construct laws constantly based on hypothetical extremes. If this were implemented, then this could possibly be the outcome. So let's put in guardrails for that. And let's make sure that even if it's not technically happening in this exact moment, that we have a framework of laws that assume that things that haven't yet happened can happen.
Donald Trump did not order a coup, despite the fact that a lot of media people say that he did on January the 6th. He encouraged people to protest peacefully. And of course, most people on January 6th did protest peacefully. What I'm saying is that you have to have some measure of liability for the official acts of presidency of the United States. And the way to create a check and balance on that system is what the Constitution prescribes here. You can't have prosecutors, many of whom, of course, are deeply embedded with the Democratic Party, trying to destroy the life of a former president who's now running for president because they think that they have a better argument for what that president should have done.
It's not, oh my gosh. I've said to you before, JD Vance, and I say this a lot to colleagues while we're preparing for these segments and just sort of pondering on what it is that's so irritating about JD Vance. And I think it's that he's better at being bad than a lot of these Republicans. Some Republicans seem to just step on a rake every 2 seconds as they're being dishonest. He has a really unfortunate talent at sounding confident and maybe slightly intellectual while he's saying something that's absolutely bonkers. You know, these prosecutors, they just disagree with what Trump did, and they think that there would have been some better way to go about trying to block the peaceful transfer of power. And listen, I'm saying that's not your say. And no, I think the assumption has been that a president could be prosecuted. The reason why we haven't seen it is because no one's been this potentially unlawful so many dang times during their time in the presidency. And also the process we have in place, due process, the system of jury of your peers judging you, and your ability to appeal, and different judges looking at the case retrospectively, and your defense team being able to defend you, and all these things we have is also something the president has access to, or a former president. And so, yes, if they're wrongfully prosecuted, just like if a Republican Senator JD Vance were wrongfully prosecuted, or a Democratic senator, whoever, they have to hope that the same guardrails that we have in place to protect people who are innocent from being convicted work out for them. That's just our system. Again, you could make the same argument for any prominent political figure, not just the president, and how they should be above the law because otherwise they could be wrongfully prosecuted. Well, no, anyone could. And that's why we have the process in place to hopefully protect from that. Obviously, sometimes it fails, but to hopefully protect from that. And also, someone who's prominent actually has an extra layer of protection, because nobody wants to be the prosecutor who prosecuted the former president and didn't get a conviction because it was a ridiculous case and now their career's torched for such a prominent failure. And so that's just the situation, because the alternative is you have a president above the law, and then if you're worried about political prosecutions, they could do horrible things, as was argued in front of the Supreme Court by Trump's lawyers, like assassinate their political opponents, and would still be above the law. So no, I think option A is much better. I'll leave it there. Let me know what you thought of all that in the comments.